Welcome everyone. Today we have again the INNS webinar, and this webinar series is organized by the International Neural Network Society. I guess most of you are already quite aware of this society, but if not, the website is very simple to find and you can also scan the barcode. Today we have a really great occasion because it is a Gabor lecture. So one of the previous Gabor award winners will give the lecture today, and the title is very intriguing. I will come to that. I wanted to motivate it by speaking about Watson. I guess most of you heard about Watson, and I asked this question to my students. They didn't. So my masters and also young PhD students have not heard about IBM Watson. Though it was a quite great success story. They started a research project around 20 years ago, and in February 2011 there was the Jeopardy Grand Challenge, where IBM Watson was playing the game Jeopardy. This given an answer, try to find questions fitting. And it wasn't particularly better in finding the right questions, but it was very good in understanding when it is sure and when not so sure, and finally won against the two best human players in Jeopardy. And IBM had a really great timeline. So they started using Watson for medicine and were forecasting that in around 5 years, hospitals will have mainly AI and not so much human power anymore. Unfortunately, most of you know how the story continued. It didn't really turn out well. Many of the technologies are quite useful, but this vision was maybe a bit ambitious, but also there were some problems. And one of the biggest problems, you have seen it also in the abstract of this talk today, is that we need to establish trust. We don't have trust in the AI systems. People will not use them specifically for these cases in medicine and many other science areas. And in order to get trust, we require safety, we require robustness, and to get really good systems, frontier research leading to these systems. And there is a lot of frontier research happening, and we will hear quite a lot about that, and many great applications in science. And who would be best talking about this? Of course, our speaker today, he is really experienced in AI for specifically bioengineering and biomedicine, but he has done many other science applications of AIs before. It's Pierre Baldi, and Pierre Baldi is working on neural networks since the 1980s, and he said he is actually proud of having continued to stick to them despite these AI winters and summers and very much changes, because they're really useful and specifically for the applications in science, practically helpful. He also said that he is specifically honored to get this Gabor Award because Dennis Gabor has invented holography. And if you read the abstract, you see that this is one of the ground ideas leading to deep learning, deep neural networks. And finally, Pierre Baldi mentioned he is also proud of his students. I'm unfortunately not one of the students of Pierre Baldi, but Pierre, if you allow me for the next hour, I want to be your student. Please share with us your experience, knowledge, and future vision of the hospital in the future.
Try for the next slide. Can you see my slides?
They're coming, now they're there, everything perfect.
Thank you so much, Marcus, and thank you everyone. It's a great pleasure to give this this presentation to you today. So I have basically collapsed, I have collapsed two talks into one, The first part of my talk, the first 30 minutes, will be the AI-driven hospital of the future. And the second part is beyond that, and I will say a few things about AI dangers. So this is a picture of our campus, half of our campus, UCI, not too far from the ocean. You're all invited to visit us. But the joke is that UCI stands for under construction indefinitely, because we are a young campus in the UC system, and every year since I've been here on this campus, at least I've seen some building under construction. And a few years ago, you would have seen this, which is the beginning of a new hospital that is now fully operational. And the great thing about this hospital, it's very green, doesn't use solar energy, and so on and so forth. And while this was built, I spoke to the administration and I proposed that we build the first AI-driven hospital of the future. And of course, they sort of laughed at me. And so we decided, so what do I mean by AI-driven hospital of the future? Of course, you get the picture. Is a hospital where AI and humans work side by side, and AI penetrates most of the processes that occur in a hospital: diagnostic, surgery, EMR, payroll, and so forth, electronic medical records. And this, of course, would help address many of the challenges we are faced, including, for instance, demographic challenges, financial challenges, and so on. And it would have the potential for providing a better healthcare, more precise, more efficient, and so on. This is obvious. These are all curves showing the sort of very fast-growing cost of healthcare in various countries. But there is also the sort of demographic challenge, if you want. For instance, if you look at the number of MRI that are done in the US, they have increased by 10% from 2016 to 2019, whereas the number of physicians, of radiologists, and so on, that can look at those images has increased only by 2.7%. So there is a mismatch between the number of doctors, if you want, and the number of and the amount of data that can be produced by all kinds of instruments. And of course, AI has the potential for addressing this. So we decided to build this AI-driven hospital of the future in the computer science department. So that's the building we're in on the 4th floor. And that's where we're running this hospital. And we didn't tell our dean or our chair, so please keep this as a secret. And so I'm going to show you some of the things we do. And of course, the first one that comes in mind is biomedical imaging. So application of neural networks, in particular convolutional neural networks, which go back to at least all the way back to Fukushima in the 70s. This is I think it's the first application of convolutional neural networks to biomedical images, in this case, biometric images. It's a fingerprint application that we developed in the late 80s. Of course, at the time, we didn't have GPUs, we didn't have large data, so it was a relatively small scale, very small scale by today's standards. But basic ideas were already in place in the 80s. And so that's what we are applying today to all kinds of imaging modalities. You can also use transformers now. It's a slightly different types of architecture, but it's the same idea. And so here is an example for drug discovery. What you see on the left are this is a collaboration with Professor Hughes in our Department of Biological Sciences. What you see on the left is a technology where you have little chambers where you can grow blood vessels. So the green stuff that you see are blood vessels. And of course, you can put stem cells, for instance, and grow small organs. You can inject cancer cells and see how they grow in relation to the vasculature. And of course, you can also administer drug through the vasculature. And so you get situation like this, where the blue dots, the blue regions corresponds to cancer cells. And of course, you want to know whether a given drug, for instance, has been shrinking the cancer cells or whether they have been proliferating. And this is a high throughput method. You can produce 1,000 such images per hour. And you don't want to have humans looking at those images and making various calls on whether the vasculature has been disrupted, whether the cancer has been spreading or not, and so on. And again, you can do this very well with convolutional neural networks. You can see the ROC here is almost perfect. This is another example. This is about cancers in the brain. I'm not going to go into details because we have done many of these, and they're all, from the point of view of technology, it's all essentially the same. It's the application of convolutional neural network to this data. This is an example where we're detecting cancer metastasis in the spine. When you have cancer in general, the first target of metastasis are the liver, the lungs, and then the spine. So you want to be able to detect whether cancer has metastasized to the spine, to which vertebra, and so on. So this is what this project was doing. This is another project on different types of images, but basically counting hair follicles on a patch of skin. I'm going to spend a little bit more time on this application that is perhaps a little more sophisticated, where you want to detect polyps in the colon, because polyps, of course, are where colon cancer starts. So in this particular project, we had about 7,000 images that were labeled, produced by Dr. Kearns in our School of Medicine. And so we train a neural network to classify images as to whether they contain a polyp or not. And if they contain a polyp, you can even train a neural network to produce a bounding box around the polyp just by doing a regression on the bounding box coordinates. It's a so-called YOLO approach. And so my student, Gregor Urban, trained a neural network that had very good performance in the mid-90s% accuracy on these images. And that's all great, but then you think about videos, right? Colonoscopy is a video. How can you adapt this technology to videos? And the answer is that there is absolutely nothing to do, because training such a network takes several days, depending on your hardware. But once it's trained, it can process a frame, one image, in about 20 milliseconds. So if you have video with, let's say, 60 frames per second, you don't have to do prediction at every frame. You can do prediction every 5 frames, for instance, and that is plenty. So that's what we did. And I'm going to show you now a sequence of colonoscopy clips, and you will see our system operating and finding polyps in real time and drawing bounding boxes around polyps. And this is now deployed in the clinic, actually. The area of the colon is roughly the area of a tennis court, and a colonoscopy takes just a few minutes, right? So it's very common for doctors to miss polyps. So having a system like this that can alert them to polyps that they may have missed, maybe you have a ringtone or something like that, depending on the interface you want to create, is very useful, actually. In the future, you can imagine having something even more sophisticated, where you have a pill, you swallow a pill which contains a camera, maybe some kind of surgical tool, and it goes through your digestive system, looks at different diseases, maybe ulcers in the stomach, and then polyps in the colon, and can even do surgeries. But if you have a tool that does surgeries and cuts the bounding box, you're going to bleed to death. So of course, what you want to do is to find the contours of the polyp. And again, using the same technology, you can see now in real time a more advanced system that is capable of finding polyps, but also finding their contour precisely. So you get the picture. Okay. Another application, this is now we're moving to the eye. In the eye, you have an anatomical structure called the trabecular meshwork, which is this line, which is very hard to see, which is an important landmark during surgeries, for instance. And so you want to be able, you would like to have a way of delineating the TM. And in this case, we just downloaded images from Google Images, plus a few images from the doctors, from Ken Lin. And this is the system. This is, you can see the delineation of the TM between the red and the green line in real time. Now we're continuing to work with eye doctors, and one of the interesting problems we're looking at now is the following, which is called colorization. So colorization is the idea of taking an image. So you see an image here, a scene with regular light, and you get this image on the right. And you can illuminate the scene with infrared light or near infrared light. And so you get a picture that looks like what you have on the right. And what you would like is to go from the infrared scene, near infrared scene, to the regular light scene automatically. So to do this correction using a neural network. Now, the reason for doing that is very simple, is that during eye surgery, surgeons illuminate your retina with regular light. And if the surgery takes several hours, this is very toxic for the photoreceptors in your eye, your cones. And very often after such a surgery, you're completely blind. If you're lucky, you recover your vision after a couple of days, but maybe some of the photoreceptors are lost forever, right? So ideally, you would like to do the surgery under infrared light or near infrared light, which is less toxic, much less energy, so it's less toxic, and that would be great. The problem is that the surgeon doesn't see as well under infrared light. So if you could provide a corrected scene to the surgeon, converting the infrared image to a regular light image, that would allow the surgeon to perform surgery with infrared light illumination, which is less toxic. So we're working on that. We have preliminary results. Now, so far you may think that I am the only doctor in the little hospital of the future that we're running, but it's not the case. This is just an example from one of my colleagues, Xiaoyi She. These are ultrasound images of the heart. And what you want is to recover, for instance, the gradients, the blood flow, the volumes in this image. And again, it can be done using these techniques. In fact, if you go on Amazon, you can buy an ultrasound scanner for about $1,500. And so we can really start doing this. It's a very nice technology. It's not invasive. So we could start using ultrasound imaging very easily, even in a computer science department. I like the fact that it's for pig, dog, sheep, tiger, bears, and other medium-sized animals. So bear and tigers are medium-sized, which is quite interesting. I don't know if they were thinking of whales or elephants, but anyway, this is another example from Xiaoyi She lab to show you that, of course, there is a lot of other things you can do besides, imaging, biomedical imaging. This is an application to DNA for looking at in genomics, for looking at certain regions of DNA. I won't go into the details, but again, it's using essentially neural networks for processing this kind of data. This is, I think, the last imaging application I'm going to show you because it shows an important point. So in this case, we're looking at mammograms, X-rays of the breast. There are tens of millions of mammograms done each year. And these are meant to detect breast cancer, of course, and people have trained neural networks or other methods for detecting nodules and breast cancer. But in this particular application, we're doing something completely different, which is we are measuring the amount of calcification in the blood vessels in the breast. And so you can see the regression curves here, where you have the level of calcification measured by radiologists. So we had some labeled data, and you have the predicted value by the neural network, and you can see that there is a good agreement on the red line. But the point, the reason I'm showing you this is to show you that in the AI-driven hospital of the future, you can have economy of scales by having one test, in this case, a mammogram, but then having many, many different AIs applied to the same image to detect different things. Having a lot of high level of calcification in your blood vessels in the breast is a potential sign of heart disease. So you come to do an X-ray for breast cancer, but we also potentially detect if you have heart disease, and of course, if you have a high level of calcification, you can be referred to different doctors for additional testing and screening. You can come to our hospital, you can bring your pets, because of course the same techniques can be applied in veterinary medicine. And in this case, this is a project where we looked at dogs and a particular disease which is called valley fever, which is contracted through a fungus that you can breathe in dusty areas. So this is a disease that is increasing because of global warming. It's endemic in the Western United States and so on. The Army has a dog training facility in Arizona, so they are very worried about this disease. And so again, we were able to get labeled data, X-rays of the lungs of dogs, and we trained the system, again, a convolutional neural network, to detect whether to classify whether valley fever is present in this dog or not. And of course, as you probably know, there are techniques for sort of reversing the flow of information in a neural network and finding which regions in the input are the most responsible for the output classification, so that this can additionally help, let's say, a veterinarian, which is looking at these X-rays, to identify regions that can be studied further. Again, very good ROC curves, accuracies in the high 90s, as good, if not better, than human experts. I had one example of a molecular level applications, which is the study of circadian rhythms, which are very important for everything in biology, because every cell in your body is oscillating on a 24-hour basis, by which I mean that the expression of your genes is oscillatory, is intrinsic oscillatory in every one of your cells. And today, with omic technology, with gene expression techniques like RNA-seq, we can study these oscillations at the molecular level. We know that disruption of circadian rhythms is involved in all kinds of diseases. And of course, circadian rhythms go back to the origin of life 4 billion years ago, because the first organisms, some of the first organisms, were photosynthetic. If you're photosynthetic, your whole metabolism is of course driven by the circadian rhythms. It's the most predictable thing in our environment, so it's extremely important for evolution. And these circuits, which have evolved over the last 4 billion years, have been really imprinted with this very strong rhythm. This is just a table showing a study that proves that most of if you look at the top drugs, here you see the top drugs that are ranked, the ranking is on the left, and you look at the target of these drugs, you can see that most of the targets are actually part of these molecular oscillatory circuits that you find in the cells. So we have been working on this for quite a while, actually, and we have developed a number of tools. One is called BioCycle, which looks at the omic time series. So for instance, if you draw blood from a patient every 2 hours or every 4 hours, throughout the day. We can study gene expression in these samples. And so when you look at gene expression in these different samples, you have to decide which genes are oscillating and which genes are not oscillating. And you may think that Fourier analysis is the best way to do that, but actually Fourier analysis doesn't work well, in part because you don't have that many time points. Let's say you do it every 4 hours. At best, you have a 6 time point along the cycles. Very often there is missing data. Some sample has been lost, etc. It's very noisy data. So again, the best thing that we found that works the best is, again, using neural networks, which in this case can be trained. So that's just a fully connected multi-layer feed-forward neural network that we train to where in the input we give the time series corresponding to a particular, to each one of the 20,000 genes in humans or in mouse. We do also experiments in mouse. And in the output, you have whether the gene is oscillating, what is the period, what is the amplitude, and what is the phase, basically. And all this can be predicted by a neural network. And maybe what is interesting in this case, it actually can be trained on completely synthetic data, because you can take mathematical functions, you can perturb them, add noise, and so forth, and you know which one are oscillatory, which one are not oscillatory. So you can generate very large amounts of such data and train a neural network to do that, and that's what we have, and it works quite well. Other completely different area where you can apply neural networks, for instance, is electronic medical records. So this is an example where we're looking at data from operations, patients that undergoes surgery, and then you want to predict a number of possible adverse events from the data around the surgery, such as reintubation, mortality, AKI, which means kidney failure, etc. And again, using these neural networks, you can get very good predictions. And I could continue, go on and on, but you get the picture. Is conceptually it's the same thing. As long as you can get the data, ideally some of it labeled, you can train neural network. It doesn't matter really whether the data is at the molecular level or all the way at the patient or population level. You can get this system to work very well. More recently, of course, LLMs, large language model, have become have been developed and have become quite powerful. So of course, we also use now transformers, LLMs. And just to give you an example of the projects, we have tested LLM. So this is another group that showed that LLM can pass basic medical education exams. And we have shown that they can pass the best LLM, GPT-4 or Claude, for instance, can pass advanced exam in medicine. For instance, they can pass the exam in anesthesiology, or they can pass the exam in veterinary medicine. So it's very specialized exams that are used can be successfully passed by GPT-4 or by the most advanced LLMs. Okay, so that's the end of the first part of my talk that gives you an idea of the AI-driven hospital of the future. I think the technology is in place for starting to do that. However, I think it will take a long time before you see a real AI-driven hospital, because even if AI is moving very fast in certain domain, its application in medicine is actually are moving very slow, because there is a lot of frictions at multiple levels for moving AI into medicine. So actually, I don't expect to see an AI-driven hospital anytime soon, even in the next 5 to 10 years. So now I want to shift gear and say a few things about AI dangers. So I'm going to do this through 4 points. First, I'm going to list some of the major dangers which are well known. I will mention a major obstacle towards addressing those dangers. I'll present a solution to address that obstacle. And then I will say a few things about how to think about AI safety from first principles. So AI dangers, there are many. They can be grouped, I think, in these 4 classes. One obvious one is the job market. A lot of jobs could be taken by AI in the next 5 to 10 years, for instance, with all the disruptions that one can think about. More long term, if AI were to take all our jobs, one can be concerned about the consequences in terms of loss of dignity, loss of purpose in our lives. Maybe we will have to create facilities where we go and we pretend to work. That seems a little bit strange, but actually we already have that today. It's called the gym, right? When you go to the gym, you're pretending to be in the fields and lifting heavy loads and things of that sort. But this is not what you're doing, of course. There is the nefarious use of AI by bad actors, and we see already plenty of examples of that, deep fakes, manipulation of elections, and so on. And then, of course, the existential threat of AI, the possibility that very advanced form of AI could take over, could control over us. Now, what is one of the major, there are many obstacles, but one of the major obstacles to studying these things is that we cannot develop the most cutting-edge AI in universities today. So you cannot build GPT-5 or GPT-6 in a university today, primarily because of budgets, because you don't have the clusters with 100,000 GPUs available and the teams, the software engineers to run and maintain such facilities. So we cannot build cutting-edge AI in that sense, and we cannot study safety at the cutting edge because we cannot build the cutting edge. The cutting edge is concentrated in private and public companies, Anthropic, OpenAI, and of course, the Magnificent Seven that you all know very well. So suppose we wanted to address this problem, what are the solutions? I think a first solution would be to try to stop AI research. That seems not feasible because countries are in competition, companies are in competition, capitalism, and so on. So stopping AI research doesn't seem to be feasible. There was a letter calling for a moratorium, a 6 months moratorium, but of course it didn't, no moratorium was put in place. So the other direction is to give universities the ability to train AI, frontier AI systems. And that's what I call the CERN AI or telescope AI moonshot, if you want, because it would involve building the largest data and computing center in the world with a substantial number of permanent staff, at least in the thousands range. When OpenAI built GPT-4 at the very beginning, I think they had 600 employees or something in that range. So you need at least 1,000 permanent staff to maintain the GPU clusters and to run the training of the system and so forth. And then, of course, you would have one or several thousands of affiliated academic labs with their postdocs, with their students, feeding into this system and running experiment, building AI frontier models. And I don't mean to imply that LLMs are the ultimate solution. There could be some efforts around advanced LLM, multimodal LLM, but of course, we could have generate other ideas and build other kinds of systems. Now, I propose this idea in an op-ed 2 years ago or so. Recently, I even published a short letter in Nature, but this has had no effect whatsoever, and maybe not surprisingly, because there are some very major obstacles to such an approach. The first obvious one is the cost. GPT-4 costs, the rumor is that it costs about $100 million, and the cost grows by a factor of 10 every generation. So GPT-5, $1 billion, GPT-6, $10 billion. You have to sustain such an effort for at least 10 to 20 years. So you're looking at trillion-dollar budgets, possibly even more, which is way above any scientific instrument that we have built before. The big instruments we have built are things like the James Webb Telescope, which is about $8 billion. Of course, CERN has a similar budget over decades of time. So we have done projects in the $10 billion range, the biggest scientific projects that have been done. But this would be one or two, possibly three scales or 3 orders of magnitude above that. And it's, of course, way above NSF pay scale, national funding agency, scientific funding agency. So this is really a project that would require investment from companies and from taxpayers, and it can only be done by very large economies. So you think about China, the US, Europe, and of course with other countries, Canada, Australia, Japan, and so on. So one issue is, of course, how international such a project would be, right? There are perhaps security issues where you want to keep that within one nation and so on. Of course, you would have to design such a facility, but many such facilities are being built in the US. Elon Musk has built one in Tennessee, so we know how to build these facilities. The technology is known, but of course you have to worry about energy, having renewable energy. Maybe you want to have water nearby because you have to cool this system and so on and so forth. But those are problems that one can be confident that they can be solved. Another problem would be the relationship to industry of such an entity. You have to carefully navigate the balance between competition and cooperation. You want, of course, NVIDIA to donate GPUs to such an effort. And of course, companies may want to hire people that have been trained, that have been gone through this CERN AI infrastructures. And universities are very much behind industry. So there is an issue of having to catch up with industry. And universities the culture of universities not to move very fast under a lot of pressure and competition. So that's also a big problem. There is the problem of the data. If you are Tesla, you're recording data from your fleet of cars. Of course, Meta has Facebook, WhatsApp, Google has YouTube, and so on, right? So we don't have that. University do not have that. So you would have to deal with that problem in some way. How do you organize such an entity, the decision making, which AI is being built? How do we make such decisions would have to be thought very, very carefully. I would think that people from industry who have done these sort of things would have to be part of the team heading such a system. You cannot put 2,000 academics in a room and expect to get some very simple decision, harmonious decision being taken. And you have a big problem with the output of such a system. If you are OpenAI, you build the GPT-5, then you serve it and you try to monetize it, right? The path is sort of obvious. Here, if you build the most advanced AI in the world, what are you going to do? You could spin off companies, you could serve it for free to the world, which is very expensive, by the way, way more than the numbers I've discussed there. Today, many of those companies, the numbers that are coming out is that the training is about 5%, and then the inference in order to serve this system, in order to do a chain of thought reasoning and so on and so forth, is 95% of the cost, right? So it's really daunting. And of course, you would have safety issues. How open this infrastructure would be, and how would you handle starting safety at the edge, and how would you would protect such efforts. Okay, so in the last few minutes, I'm going to say something about AI safety. And the question I was asking myself is, how can you think about AI safety from first principles? I think thinking from first principles is always very important in science and everywhere else. So the best I could come with is the following, is that to remark that AI is inspired by natural intelligence, right? We use neural networks, and neural networks, of course, are inspired by the brain. What about thinking about AI safety being inspired by natural intelligence safety? Now, this may seem a strange question to you, but if you start thinking about it, if you think about natural intelligence, human intelligence, you realize very rapidly that it's not safe at all. Our intelligence is not safe at all, because if you look at our history, well, it's a sequence of wars, of genocides, of increasingly more sophisticated weapons and methods of torture, and so on and so forth. And you have high school shootings and so forth. So human intelligence is actually very dangerous, and can create disasters, to the point that you may be surprised that we're still alive as a species, right? With such a potential for doing bad things with our intelligence. And so the fact that we're still alive means that there are all kinds of mechanisms that must be in place to prevent natural intelligence from going completely rogue. And so you start thinking about these mechanisms, and I put a list on the left of this table. And then you think on the AI side, and you can see that there are all kinds of parallels. So it's a nice way of organizing the landscape of artificial intelligence safety. Now, I don't have time to go through every box in these tables, but I'll just say a few things. But basically, they are organized along an axis that goes from the pre-training of a system to the training of a system to the post-training and the deployment of the system. And of course, there are feedback loops between these different levels. But if you think about pre-training, you think about evolution, you think about the brain, and you think about the mechanisms in the brain that are, that result in us having, somewhat ethical behavior and feeling guilty if we were to steal or to lie or to kill and so forth. And some of these mechanisms seems to be innate. I mean, Kant, the philosopher Kant, used to marvel about the stars in the sky and the moral law inside of us. And so that's the idea on the AI side, would be to build modular architectures that have built-in this sort of sense of ethics. And that's an area of research. We don't know very well how to do it, but it's definitely an area of research. After the pre-training, if you want, during training, there is all kinds of mechanisms that can be put in place. So on the human side, during development, you have parents, teachers, role models that hopefully behave well and teach you by example somehow what a good behavior is. And of course, this is very similar to the idea of reinforcement learning from human feedback. Another system that is in place is the use of a small number of principles, for instance, like the 10 Commandments in religion, or constitution for countries. The equivalent is constitutional AI, where you can have a small number of principles that actually are used not only during training, but that are present at all times during the prompt. So when you enter a query into an LLM, you have what are called system prompt, which is, let's say, a set of principles in the background that are present, that are added to any prompt, so that the whatever answer the LLM is producing hopefully follows those basic principles. And you can go on through the list, and I'm sure you could come up with additional ideas. But for instance, at the enforcement level, where you have police, for instance, and lie detectors, the equivalent of a lie detector is, of course, a fake detector in the AI space. When you look at this and you keep thinking about this, you realize that basically evolution has failed. Evolution alone does not make human intelligence safe at all. This could be for a number of reasons. I think they're a combined set of reasons. One is that it's probably a very difficult problem, and evolution was not able to solve it entirely. But also, you get a sense that evolution did not want, or of course, it's dangerous to talk about evolution in these anthropomorphic terms. But evolution didn't want to solve this problem entirely, because in an uncertain environment where you could have adversarial attacks and so on, you don't want to completely get rid of the ability for humans to be violent or to be able to respond to violence in violent ways, right? In any case, you see that the solutions that have emerged are definitely multi-tier. It's a combination of all kinds of different things. Pre-development, during development, after development, at the individual level, at the societal level, and so on. And then, of course, there is the possibility that AI is also similar but different from natural intelligence, and that other principles or methods may apply to AI safety. And of course, we have to be open to that and to conduct research on that. And I think I'm out of time, so I thank you for your attention, and we'll take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pierre. Yes, we still have a bit of time also for discussions and so on. So maybe someone has some questions. You can raise your hands when you have questions, or since we are not so many, you can just shoot. I have no, there is one. Please, Pilar, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Perry, for your presentation. I would like to know a little more about your opinion in these articles that you show that are able to pass the exams of the medical exams. Why do you think that that could be a insight that deep learning it's a good idea? I have a different conception about that, but I would like to know, do you think that the automatic passing of that exams really shows that they are able to give a diagnosis, a right diagnosis?
Well, that's a complicated question. I mean, the exams, first of all, the exams, these are sort of university level exams. So it's like you could ask the question, is a doctor that just passed the first university test, is a doctor ready to be in a hospital and to practice medicine, right? In general, they are not. They need to go through a period of training and so forth. Then there is the issue maybe of rare diseases or rare configurations that usually do not appear in the standard exam and so forth. So I'm not saying that LLMs are ready to replace doctors as of today. Of course not. But they are very powerful. They can look at, they can study all the medicine literature. They can get the records of 100 million patients. No doctor sees 100 million patients in his lifetime, right? So the power is there. Again, so that's the direction. And I do think that over time, you could have a technology that in many areas is as good and possibly better than human doctors. But that doesn't mean you have to replace the doctors. They could work side by side, and so on and so forth. And we have, demographic challenges, maybe not immediate in the US, but certainly in Europe, in certain countries, it's well known in Italy, in Spain, and so forth. The demographic situation is very bad. So, and you have aging population, and you may not have enough doctors for the population. So having AI help would make sense in that sense.
Okay, thank you.
I had something a bit related to that as well, which is about the passing a test and the practical experience and so on. But I really resonate with what you're saying with the assistance. I definitely think the AI systems should serve a lot as assistants and take over these tasks where humans are just, we don't have enough stuff to take. A look at all of these pictures, as you correctly mentioned, or mentioned, they are being scanned. But we realize that quite often, once you devise a test, let's say a written test or whatsoever, even IQ tests nowadays, large language models are able to pass them, but they're still failing with very simple reasoning tasks and so on. Isn't it very similar with these examinations? And what we do here at LTU in our medicine department, they do a lot of practical exercises and so on. And whenever it goes there, even simple tasks cannot be done by quite sophisticated robotics systems. So as soon as you interact with a real environment and so on. So I was wondering, isn't it that the tests only check several aspects and all these physical aspects or real world aspects are not really taken into account, and that's why it's maybe easier to pass those tests?
Yes, and in biomedical imaging, I think you really have systems that can do very well on analysis of biomedical images as well, or even better than humans today. In addition, if you were able to aggregate data over time across hospitals and so on, this system could get better and better in a way that doctors cannot do. But this aggregation of data across hospital, across centers, across states, and so forth is a huge problem because there is a lot of friction. And actually, even within the UC system, we have 14, 15 medical centers, something like that. And it's 25 years that I'm told that we're going to be able to share data across different centers, but it has not happened. If I want to get data from UCLA or UC San Diego, it's still extremely, there is a mechanism in place, but it's extremely cumbersome and difficult. And, most scientists don't have time to do that. Now, when you think about robotic things that are in the 3D world and so forth, yes, that's still a challenge. But the people are working on that. There's a lot of robotic companies and a lot of efforts in that direction. But I agree that that's a little bit behind the LLMs, the text-based stuff that you see in with GPT-4 and so on.
I was hoping that Danilo will raise a hand because I've seen an intriguing presentation by you as well. Please, Danilo, shoot.
Thank you very much. Hi, Pierre. Good to see you, and thank you for a very, very insightful presentation. So, I hope you can hear me.
Yes, very well.
So, it's really about the future e-health and, say, doctorless hospitals. At least we can bypass maybe primary care and such like and go directly to specialists. And in that sense, I think wearable technologies, together with approaches you have shown, play a major role. On the other hand, I know it from my other work on AI for finance. In financial institutions, the stakeholders like interpretable solutions. So even if your AI produces a solution which is maybe a little bit better, they would still go for something they can interpret and understand. So in your opinion, how much is this interpretability or black box of a burden for adopting AI into the health system?
It is a little bit of a burden, but of course it's an active area of research. And there are plenty of cases where we have methods for addressing it. So for instance, in biomedical imaging, there are those techniques where you reverse the flow of information and you try to find which features in the input were responsible for the decision. So you create this heat map on the input image, and that's a way of it's definitely a big step in the direction of interpretability, right? That's an example. With LLM, you can ask the LLM to reason or to explain why it produced a certain answer, and that provides some interpretability. So I think there are ways of addressing it. It's an area of research, but there are ways of addressing these issues of interpretability.
Thank you.
I had also a very specific question. When you showed these images from the mammography scans, and you said, yeah, there could be then even the use of these images. I really like it when you do these scans that you can do other diagnoses on the side with other systems and so on. However, I'm also aware, sometimes I was missing a bit this big picture, because mammography scans by themselves sometimes can also induce cancer. It's, of course, only a fraction of cases compared to what we save by the screening. But there are research directions trying to avoid it, for example, to look more with newer methods into the blood and trying to see if we find tumor indicators there as well. So I was wondering a little bit the big picture, right? Your research is very, very important and contributing to many assistive technologies for what's currently being done by many doctors. But how would you envision, you said it will not be there in 5 to 10 years, but maybe in 20 years, the hospital of the future, what will happen there? Is there something which will radically change, or will it be mainly tasks currently done by humans being taken over by AI systems?
Well, I think you have the tasks done by humans currently could be taken or assisted by AI, but there is many other tasks that we haven't thought of or we haven't developed that could be taken by AI, right? You could imagine as you walk into the hospital, there are cameras that look at your gait, that estimate your weight, etc. That could speed up the process, for instance. You're talking about the issue of getting X-rays, and maybe X-rays are not that good for you sometimes. Well, you could train an AI that sort of tells you what's the optimal time to take the next X-ray, right? If current rules are okay, if you are above let's say 35 years old, you should have a mammogram every 2 years. But that's not a very precise rule, and maybe it runs into the problem you are saying. So if we had studied this problem carefully, if we had the data and everything, the system would say, oh, you need to take a mammogram, but you can wait 3 years or 3.5 years, right? So you could optimize a lot of these things that today are not optimized at all. When you take a drug, the doctor may say, at best, may say, take it in the morning. But because of circadian rhythms, if you took the drug at the right time, you could take maybe less. So you would have less side effects because you take a small amount of drug, but you take it at the right time within your circadian rhythm, right? It should be at 8 a.m. instead of sometimes in the morning, right? So there is a lot of things that could be fine-tuned and be much more precise and even personalized if we wanted to, and if we had the data, right? If we collected the data. So there is room for that over the next, in the future. And these are just examples. I'm taking some random examples.
Yeah, so at the end, as you mentioned, it really boils down to the data and availability of data. I happen to know here in Sweden quite a few doctors, and apparently there is some data available, but of course not publicly for everyone. But they also told us that the scheduling, not only when we take medicine, but also just which patients to take in the hospital and at which time to take them in. You mentioned now with the mammography, it's really strange that it's a 2 years rhythm. It should be much more individualized, and there are many other procedures which can be probably optimized if we would properly use that data.
Yeah, like colonoscopy every 5 years. It's a typical recommendation. You know, if they find a polyp after a certain age, then you need to do colonoscopy every 5 years. Obviously, that is not optimized and it's not personalized, such a recommendation, right?
Yeah. Are there other questions?
Good morning. I have a question.
Go ahead.
My name is Noru, so thank you for the great talk. But I had one question, right? How do you see the role of statistical modeling in updating AI?
What do you mean by statistical modeling? I mean,
so
AI is a form of statistics in some way. So
that's
what
right.
do you mean?
How do you see us training our students, in updating the models equations in mathematics and statistics? Because that's what the data is going to be modeled after.
I'm not sure I understand. Training students, how to use AI in universities, that's a huge problem. And I'm not sure this is what you are asking about. If you're talking about updating the models as you get more and more data.
So how do you see, or how would you recommend we train them in math and statistics so that they can understand what AI is doing?
This is I don't have any recommendation. I mean, how to use AI in the training of young statistician and so forth. I don't have a recommendation. I mean, this is a very big problem for education, right? And how do we integrate AI in universities? How do we use it and so forth?
Maybe I would like to refer, we have this lecture here will also be recorded. And we have a recording of a lecture which was just given a few days ago by Irvin King about the future of education. And if I remember correctly, one of his recommendations was that one should use a lot of Socratic learning. So instead of providing students with chatbot-based answers and so on, letting students interact with chat-based tools, which ask the students questions so that the students actively learn and so on. But it's just one angle. Please watch that video from Irvin King. You will find it in the INNS webinar series. Is there any more question to the current topic of AI in the hospital in the future?
I mean, one good thing of AI in education is that, as you interact with an AI, and if the AI is sophisticated enough, the AI will understand where is your frontier, where is the frontier of your knowledge. And so it will be able to provide example challenges that are exactly at the frontier where things are not boring, but not too difficult, right? Which is the frontier where you're learning. So having this sort of personalized interaction, personalized tutor is a potential advantage of these AI systems in education.
I had one last aspect, since we now speak about again of these large language models. We had not only it's quite a few research have been being performed, and if I remember correctly, the annual webinar just before Christmas also highlighted that a bit. If you ask, for example, a large language model, why did you do this decision? It will tell you why I did it, but it's not always exactly true. So it comes up with a made-up explanation, which is not the actual explanation. Have you experienced something like that in the medical area as well when you used LLMs?
I don't have an examples that comes to mind, but I'm familiar. I've seen examples of this sort of behavior in other areas, and obviously it's an area of research. Hallucinations and lying by large language models is clearly an area of research and of interest.
As you really highlighted, trust and establishing trust is very important, and if the language models comes up with explanations which are not actually the real ones, it will again lead to another Watson story. But yeah, thank you again so much for sharing your insights regarding AI and the hospital of the future and beyond. I will now give a short, first a round of applause. Yes, exactly. Thank you again.
Thank you.
And we are now looking also into the upcoming webinars. Sorry. You will always find the actual current list of planned webinars on the website inns.org. And 2 of them are already scheduled and confirmed. And the first one is just in a few days, in 4 days from now, quite related and a really broad and important topic. This is this regulatory AI, the AI Act and other new regulations coming into place. What do they actually have as effects for the technical and scientific communities? We have really high-profile speakers from the European Commission there, Eleanor and Emmy, and they will give really great insights. So mark the same time slot on the 5th of May if you're interested on the effects of the AI Act. And then we had a Gabor lecture today. There is a Helmholtz lecture being planned of Thierry Sejnowski, and he will speak about some of his research on perception on the 12th of June. We will have maybe one more webinar. You will see it in the website, but we will also plan to physically meet and have the International Joint Conference on Neural Networks. Of course, it's already been decided and papers being accepted, but if you want to discuss with us, with other researchers from the International Neural Network Society, join us in Rome. This time we have a record number of accepted papers, around 3,000. So there will be really many people coming to that conference. And I'm really looking forward to the physical interaction with all of you in the end of June in Rome, in Italy. So don't hesitate, join the International Network Society, join us on IJCNN, and we will see you again just in a few days in our next webinar. Thank you very much.